Hi everybody, welcome back to part 2 of the Stellium Astrology Podcast with Frank Clifford. Frank and I have just had a little chat and we've been figuring out what we'd like to discuss for the second part after we had an interesting exploration of all sorts of astrological avenues. And we've decided that actually it would be really fun to look at solar arc directions, because most people have heard of solar progressions, which is one type of method for prediction, but also I think it's a slightly different feel to transits and to solar arc directions. And not many people have heard of solar arc other than if they've come for a reading with me. And that's what we learned at the LSA. And Frank has written about this. He referred to a book that a leaflet, a smaller book, and now a slightly bigger book that he's built on in the first half. But actually what always tickled me was Frank's story about how he discovered solar arc direction. So I'd love for you to share that with the listeners and viewers.
I'll try and remember it now, Stephanie, but I just remember looking at a chart and realizing that the number of degrees between any 2 points seemed to be an important year in somebody's life. So you might have the Sun and Venus 20 degrees apart, and that was a year that seemed to be a combination of Sun and Venus. And so I always joked that I thought, being a good Aries, that I'd discovered solar arc. And then you realize that, of course, people have named it, done a lot of hundreds of years of study and work on it. So yes, no, I didn't, unfortunately, discover solar arc, but I've had a great fun exploring it over the years. And what I found over the years, we all start really looking at the natal chart, and then we hear about transits and how those planets in the sky keep moving on, and they start to make aspects, what we call transits, to our natal chart. But then later on, you learn about secondary progressions, which is based on a day for a year, where you look at the ephemeris and say 30 days after your birth in the planetary tables, the ephemeris, which has all the planetary positions in it. 30 days after is really what the chart looks like when you turn 30. 60 days when you turn 60. And that's secondary progressions based on the ephemeris. And it's a symbolic system. Very simply, 1 day of the ephemeris equals 1 year of your life. But solar arc is simpler than that. And what I found was that it's just a lot more effective. It works better. When clients come and see me, I can usually know why they're here before they sit down. I can look at their transits and look at their solar arc directions and understand pretty much everything they talk about in the consultation. And I always say to students, if they surprise you and you can't see what's going on in their lives in your tools, then you need better tools. So I've always used transits and solar arcs. I've never used secondary progressions after my initial study of them. I just found that solar arcs did the work much better and more effectively. But as always, people should follow whatever works for them. But solar arc is moving the whole chart forward 1 degree a year, like secondary progressions, but everything moves at the sun's rate, the solar arc. So with secondary progressions, you'll get planets going retrograde like they do in the ephemeris. They'll start to make aspects with each other. You'll have the progressed lunation cycle, but with solar arc, it's super simple. So shall I share my screen and shall we have a look at your own, Stephanie?
Yes, let's do it.
So
I have a question for you.
Please.
When you thought you'd invented solar arc directions, did you have your own name for them?
No, I don't think I did. No. I know that I do a thing called shadow transits, and I named that, and that's really linking transits to solar arcs rather than just transits to the natal. And the funny thing is, we were talking about Noel Till in the first part, and Noel said never combine the two, and that was his rule of thumb to all of his students. And when he and I met, I was talking to him about using transits with solar arcs, and he said, they don't work. And I said, well, I've seen them work all the time. And to his credit, he had enough respect for me and my work to say, show me, and write me an article about it. And it's interesting that his website, I don't think it can't have been updated often, but it's still on his website, and it's been on there about 10 years, this article that I wrote, and it's the last article really that I think was uploaded there. So I wrote an article specifically for him of how to combine the two. And he was very open to it. And I thought, good on you for being 70 something years old and still being open to new ideas, new combinations, other people's work. So I was happy with that. The funny thing is that when he published that article on his website, and I think it's been published in lots of different places and in different forms since then, it's his students that had a issue with it, saying Noel never would combine them, and you shouldn't do it. And it's and I got all sorts of crap from his students, which was really funny.
Wow.
Only a few of them, but it was interesting and I wrote back saying Noel was big enough to explore it and to look at it. And in fact, people like Basil Farrington and a few other astrologers now use them as well. So it's always interesting what people moan about. And it's that thing about astrology, we were talking in the first section about it being your lens, and astrology is a lens, and it's a very personal lens. And if somebody criticizes your house system, your method of prediction, the planets that you use or don't use, you've got to realize that people have their own approach. And if you're a Capricorn, the Gemini rising like you, and we can see here the moon in Scorpio, your lens on life is going to be different from mine. We may share things in common, but you'll want to go deep in places that maybe I don't want to look at, or you may attract certain clients that reflect who you are, your own issues, things that I wouldn't have a clue about. And that's why I don't attract clients like that. So having your own personal lens, having your own style is super personal. It's like having your taste in music. Why criticize somebody else's taste in music? It doesn't make any sense to me. No. So astrology is a bit like that. You'll have your own style, you'll be your own astrologer, and don't apologize for that.
It's you saying about people who kind of get attached to certain ideas. There's an author, and he was quite a figurehead in the psychedelic movement back in the days of Tim Leary and all the LSD trials in Harvard. But he's written a number of books, one of them called Prometheus Rising. His name's Robert Anton Wilson, which is all about perspective and belief system and how powerful your reality tunnel can be. And everybody has their own reality tunnel that they see through, and that's how the world works to them. And he says you'd be better off messing with a man's wife than trying to mess with his reality tunnel, because it's so personal, and people become so attached to it. Essentially, we're talking about the ego here, aren't we? But it's true, and it's funny. I find it amazing. I'm not saying that I don't have my own ego, and I've transcended ego, but I must have my own issues. But I find it interesting when people really get attached to certain ideas that it's part of who they are and their identity, and how they can accept the world around them, I suppose, really more than anything, can live with the more non-negotiable aspects of their existence. So just when you said that, just made me think about that actually. But I have been using back on Solar Arc, I have been using Solar Arc plus progressions plus transits. I find that sometimes they all just line up. And when you see something like that, it's a bit of a moment where you think this must be poignant, this must be huge for somebody.
That's right. If you know how to line things up, it doesn't matter what you use. Pamela Crane, the astrologer who uses interdimensional astrology, the sidereal zodiac, the draconic zodiac, the tropical, the zodiac we're used to looking at, the tropical zodiac. She just knows how to look at things, and she'll do quadri-wheels, 4 wheels. And for most people, that's a giant headache. But if you can do it, do it. And that's the other thing I love to tell people nowadays. You probably haven't heard this, Stephanie, or maybe you did. Maybe I was saying it back then as well. But, if you have a specialism, if you have something you really love, run with it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. I know one of yours is Lilith, of course, and we're getting you to do that for the school in China very soon. Looking forward to that. And if you've got that, you will have people who need that. So don't shy away from being the Lilith astrologer, the Lilith queen, or the Chiron queen, or whatever it is. As long as you're conscious of your own process and awareness of that, and you're not, and it's not an ego thing of I want to be the famous one talking about Sedno or something like that. That's where the ego gets involved. But if you have a specialism, and mine is solar arc, and I've got a few other things I really love doing and love teaching. If you've got that, you will attract the people who absolutely need that from you. And so if you're a Lilith fan and expert, then you will attract people who absolutely need that insight in their lives. I won't, because it's not my specialism. So again, it's like your own lens, your own loves, your own specialisms. Run with them, because you will, that will be your world. And when you're ready for something new, be ready to embrace something new when you can. Getting fixed in one method, one way of delineating the chart is tiring for both you and your client. Eventually you'll get clients that come in, and then you'll get a client that will require that you push yourself. I remember, speaking of Noel Till, actually, when he came to London some years ago, somebody asked him about Chiron, and it must have been like 2006, 2007. And he said, I haven't got time to learn Chiron. And I thought, well, it's been around since 1977. It's not like it's just popped up. It's a bit like Mahi Mahi, or one of those, or one of the so-called new planets where everybody's starting to research. It made me laugh, because he said, I haven't got time to do Chiron, when in reality, when we're ready, we're ready to be a student again in a new area. It will present itself to us, but we have to be open to it. It's a bit like rectification as well. You and I have had conversations about this over the years. It's that the idea that it has to be one thing is anathema to me. I don't understand that. I did a rectification for somebody last week, and she really didn't know. She had a sort of window of time that was about 5 hours. And it was interesting, but I said to her from the very beginning, I'm not going to find you the right answer. I'm going to find an answer that seems to resonate with what you're giving me. And once we've worked with it, I'll show you. And she knew a bit of astrology, and we looked at it. And I said, once we've worked on it, go away with it and test it. I certainly wasn't offering a paid session to give her the definitive answer, because that sort of thing, even with our own charts, it takes us years to see how things click and maybe to adjust things. Just in the last couple of years, I've adjusted my own birth time a little bit, just because it seems to resonate at a different time. So it's about being open and being willing to do that. Feeling there's only one way, or there's only one right answer, says so much about somebody's ego or personal insecurity or desperate need to be right. And we as astrologers, life is unpredictable enough. People are unpredictable enough. The idea that we can get things predicted or nailed, or things are black or white, when we know, particularly if you've got a Scorpio moon like you, we know there are at least 40 to 50 shades of gray, Stephanie.
Yes,
not
exactly.
just black and white.
Well, it's true, but also I think the way you speak about astrology and sort of like combining methods and different ideas and things like that is very mercurial, isn't it? It's that Gemini need to explore different ideas, which I can completely resonate with, because I have a Gemini ascendant. I'm assuming if you've rectified your chart recently that you still have a Gemini ascendant.
I definitely have a Gemini ascendant. Yeah. I teach myself that every day when I look at the piles of books that I'm working on.
There's absolutely no way you can deny that.
I couldn't be anything but. Yes, sure. Yeah. But again, it's identity, isn't it? And I've seen people who identify with a particular ascendant from wish fulfillment rather than reality. I had a student, I worked, the first and only real job I ever had at the age of 16, 17. I worked in an office with a woman who was so Capricorn Saturn, you couldn't make it up. And she even looked, she was like her cheeks were like chiseled, like out of marble chiseled cheeks, and she was deadly serious, and she had a great sense of humor, but everyone thought she was incredibly self-contained and quite severe, and had this and she did her birth time, or had done a chart online, and it hadn't calculated her birth time properly, or the the time zone, something had happened, and she said she was Sagittarius rising. And when I put it in my computer, and I had a little handheld computer that you had to type in, and then it gave you all the planetary positions. I had one of those first back in the early 90s. And it turned out that she was not just Saturn rising in the first, but with Sag rising. So Saturn in the first, but Sag rising. She was Saturn rising in Capricorn. Yes, and she never forgave me for that.
Oh, dear.
But she really loved the idea that she was Sag rising. And because she knew who she was, and she knew that she didn't necessarily want to be as somebody had written her up to be. And in fact, when she became a Capricorn rising and we adopted that, it was fine. But it's so often, I don't want to be that, or I don't believe in astrology because I don't like what they say about Virgo, or I don't want to be a moon in Scorpio because of what somebody's written about it. And often I'll question students and clients about that and say, I'm definitely, like the client the other day, she said to me, well, she gave me a list of events, but I didn't want to know the event. I wanted to know how she felt at that time about that event, because the event itself doesn't matter so much. So, she gave me a whole list of different things through her life with a little note of what happened to her. And it came out that I thought she was Cancer rising, and she liked Taurus because she felt that she was Taurus. But from the story, there's no way she could have been Taurus, actually, because of the timings of the chart, etc. But she could have been Gemini, Cancer, or Leo rising, possibly Virgo. And I plumped with Cancer. And she's like, well, I'm not like my sister, who's really mumsy and caring. But I wanted to challenge her idea of Cancer. That's the thing, because your idea of a sign, and you think, well, there's no way I could be that. Have a read of somebody else's interpretation of that. In England, we have a bit of an aversion to Leo as being too showy, too loud, too attention-seeking. But, Leo is also about having heart and passion. And I know a lot of Leos who aren't this sort of bratty, Bette Midler in Beaches type of child, like listen to me and perform. Most of the Leos I know aren't like that, but people read that and they don't want to be that. So often I'll say, what is it that you don't like about that sign? And she said to me, I'm not Cancer rising. And I said, well, in your chart, if you're Cancer rising, Saturn is on the descendant, exactly opposite that. And the idea of you being a caretaker in some other level, in a business capacity, is really what she was. But she thought Cancer rising is somebody that cries and is emotional and doesn't have, and I said, no, it's got the shell, it's protective for family, and a whole range of other things that she hadn't considered. So I loved, being a Gemini rising like you, I love to be able to say, well, on the other hand, Gemini, on the other hand, think of it like this, try it like this. What about that option? Have you considered that it could be this part of you? And that to me is really effective often. And it was with her. And I asked her we had a whole hour and 15 looking at the chart. And I said to her, go away with that. Have a think about that. Explain the Saturn influence and how that influenced the ascendant. And everything she said was so Saturnian, and it had to be on an angle, really, for it to be that Saturnian in her life. So she's gone away to think about it. But the idea that it had to be that way, I could never sit with that comfortably, because life, as I say, isn't black and white. And people's perceptions often of signs can be very different from that. You meet Scorpio ascendant, Scorpio moons, who, they're not, as I would say in class, it's not all whips and chains and leather bondage outfits,
The amount of people that jump to that conclusion immediately, though, it's just so boring.
You mean the number of people you have to whip into shape until
Well, it's just, the amount of people that have looked at my chart and they go, oh, Scorpio moon in the 5th house. Oh, And then I go,
Oh,
eighth
no.
house sun. And it's just like, I'm honest, I can assure you I'm very boring. Like it's not what you think.
Well, it is what I think, because I know you, and it's about going deep, and it's
Yeah.
about exploration, you know. And Scorpio is that image in some people's mind of the sex maniac or the I'm going to get you back. And in fact, most Scorpios I know resonate to the higher level of deeper meaning, psychology, playing the detective, going deep in life. And it doesn't really resonate with somebody that's going around either screwing or, you know, screwing up, screwing, or screwing other people or whatever, you know, that idea of vengeance and sex doesn't really speak. But it's interesting the prejudices we have. And yeah.
The base level of astrology. Just touching on what you're saying about rectification. I remember when I got my birth records and my ascendant went from 23 Gemini to 17. And actually for me, suddenly it made so much more sense because my sun went, I think in the Placidus system, it was always in the 8th house, but by equal, it was in the 7th. And I'd kind of been to, I'd had readings where it was focused on a 7th house sun. And I kind of thought, I just don't know if I feel that. Like, I just don't know if I get that 7th house sun thing. And as soon as I got my new birth time and it put my sun firmly in the 8th by equal or by Placidus and other house systems, I suddenly thought, I really get it now. It really makes sense to me. So, you know, on the other hand, you know, it can, you know, rectifying the chart, if you've got somebody who's reluctant to a different idea, I was worried that as soon as I saw that my birth time was wrong, I can't describe the fear that was struck into me of just like, oh, everything I know is wrong. But it was only a few degrees, fortunately for me. But the shift that occurred really did make a big difference, a huge difference actually for me. And it was such a small shift as well. But, you know, just to put your sun from one house to the other. And some people who, you know, change house systems don't really notice any kind of change at all with their charts. But for me, that really made a big difference. So, you know, rectifying the chart, it can be a bit scary when you suddenly realize you've got new information or something doesn't quite fit. But, you know.
Again, but students want that as well at the beginning. They want to know that there's only one house system and that it's either right or wrong. So how can my sun be in the 4th or the 3rd and the 3rd? How can it go from the 11th to the 12th? And it's yes, and it's a difficult one. And it really is. I always say it's just different ways of dividing the pizza. And we always know that if something is important in the chart, it's going to show up 2 or 3 times. And we also know that anything around the 4 angles, wherever you decide to put those angles, are going to be important too. So if you know the key themes, the key signatures, and where to find them, you'll find them whatever house system you use. I would say all roads lead to Rome if you know where you're going.
Yeah, I've often quoted that on this podcast with you, with your, you know, all roads lead to Rome with different house systems or different methods. You know, if you've got a good vocabulary and you kind of, you know, you've investigated the chart and you've picked out the main themes, you're going to get a similar message from each one, aren't you? Really, you're going to get to the same place, really.
You are, or you're going to get different approaches to themes that are going to be useful anyway. So had you stayed a 7th house sun in one system, but an 8th in another, why not, you know, if one resonates more with you, great. Why not look at the other occasionally and say, if I were to do that, what would that mean about me? That's useful exploration. Any self-indulgent, self-involved exploration is incredibly useful. You know, I used to joke that astrology should be called self-centered astrology, because it is all about you. And this is why the fascination that people have, but also it is literally about you. It's nobody else's business. Really.
Yeah, it's true. It really is. Yeah, I agree. So we were going to talk a bit about solar arcs, weren't we? Now I'm really curious actually to explore it now. It's been a while since I've looked at my own chart really in this way.
Okay. So, well, we won't go too personal, of course. But what I want people to see is just look at the chart for a moment. Look at Stephanie's chart and you can see, just count the degrees between them. So notice that Jupiter is just about 5 degrees. and change or less. It's actually 4.5 or almost 5 degrees, because we've got 30 degrees in a sign, and per degree, we divide it up into 60 minutes of space of arc. So everything has a degree between 0 and 29, and everything has a minute from 0 to 59, just to let you know. They're not minutes in time, they're minutes of arc. So Jupiter and Uranus are about 5 degrees apart. And with solar arc, everything moves forward anti-clockwise through the zodiac, even if it's retrograde, even if it's an angle, etc. So around the age of 5, Jupiter will move to Uranus. We'd show that in an outer wheel, in a bi-wheel that we'll look at in a minute. And Uranus would have moved 5 degrees as well, further on to about 12 degrees. So we could say that at 5 years old, there's going to be a Jupiter-Uranus feeling. That could be a bit of an adventure, a bit of travel, a bit of a shock, a bit of an accident. We don't know. It could be a number of Jupiter-Uranus things or lucky surprises. Or it might not be anything that Stephanie remembers because it's the age of 5. We might look at the Saturn and see that it's about 12 degrees away from the moon. So we expect to hear a Saturn moon type of experience around the age of 12. And I give about half a degree orb. And we can see that Pluto, which is about 4 degrees behind Saturn, reaches the moon around the age of 16, 1 degree a year. So it goes from 29 and then it steps into 0, and then you add another 15 degrees. So we should expect a moon-Pluto type of feeling, Pluto to moon feeling in Stephanie's life around the age of 16. So that's what you do. You just look at any 2 points. The midheaven is 11 degrees away from Mars. Venus is about 8 degrees. And we know that really the early stuff is stuff that's going to be super, super important, but it may not be things that we absolutely remember on a mental level, but we'll remember them in a different way. So Stephanie may not know about the age of 5 or the age of 8, but the family might know. It might be in a diary, it might be somewhere, or it might be an unexpressed feeling at that point. But
I'm
as
thinking
we get
5 might have been school, and just getting to school and thinking, I remember being in my sort of first class. I'm not talking like nursery school, that was different. It was a bit more fun being at actual school in the infants, and just thinking, I remember asking the question, how long do we have to stay at school for? And they said, you have to stay in school till you're 16. And I just remember thinking, I can't do this. I just can't. This is just, I can't do this.
But what was your strategy? What did you end up playing up, or did you end up?
I was very naughty, really naughty girl,
okay.
Very naughty girl. I was, I liked to play, and I didn't really like to study. I just was not really interested in the learning aspect of it all. I think that for me, I have to be really interested in something to really take it on board. And I just couldn't take anything in at school. So I was a typically naughty girl who always was told I wasn't really, throughout school, like not really going to achieve much and that kind of thing. But I just remember, literally, I can remember exactly where I was standing at that school, asking that question and looking out into the playground and thinking, first of all, I've got to spend 4 years here, 3 or 4 years here, and then I've got to go on to another school. But secondly, I have to stay in school until I'm 16. I just couldn't deal with it. My brain was just imploding at that point, and I was looking around thinking, I don't want to be here at all. I hated it from the word go.
What a great shame. And was there any, because that Jupiter, it may be other things going on in your chart at that point, but with that Jupiter Uranus aspect speaks of I want to get the hell out of here. It can be about freedom and space and being naughty and contradictory and all of that, and wanting to be free and independent. But was there any subject that really did interest you, that would keep you focused?
The only thing actually in school, maybe not as early as 5 years old, but the only thing that really interested me throughout school was when we started studying human biology. I found interesting, but also astronomy. And those astronomy was the subject that I really wanted to choose to go and study in college, but they didn't have enough people apply, because we sat down and watched a video on all the planets, and I was just like, this is my subject. This is it. I want to know more. And at that point, I was going to the library and getting books on space and things like that. This before I kind of really got into astrology. I was interested, but hadn't really made the connection of the depth of the subject. Whereas with astronomy, you know that it's a study of the planets, you know, and it's kind of relatively respectable. You know, I didn't know the depth of astrology. But yeah, as around 5 years old, I know that I hated school. I struggled with it a lot. I hated the routine. I couldn't bear getting out of bed. You know, I just loved the freedom of play school. And I was still naughty at play school as well, but you know, it was less, it just felt like there was less rules and restrictions, you know. It was just, and I had horrible teacher in my first few years at school as well, who was a real bully. So she hated me. She told my mum that every time I go into school, there's an aura of mischief about me, and what can I do today? I know I was naughty, but she really hated me, and she made it very, like, she told my mum that, you know, she really didn't like me. So which obviously my mum didn't like to hear, but yeah, so school was a really tough time for me. Pretty much all the way through school, I struggled so much.
One of the reasons I love being a teacher, and I always wanted to be a teacher, and it only dawned on me a few years ago that I actually am a teacher. I always think of myself as an astrologer and writer, and then realized that I've ended up doing what I always wanted to do. But you wonder why schools are full of so many sadists, and people that, I mean, I know you have to be a bit tough being a teacher with children. You get taken advantage of, you know, you have to show discipline to some extent, but it seems to be full of people like that teacher. You being naughty, so what? You're 5 years old.
Yeah.
You know, what are you supposed to do at 5? Why does she hate you with such venom that she had a thing about you? Why didn't she just welcome you as the naughty one and think it was funny, and Stephanie's the naughty one, you know?
I love the naughty children when I meet them. I do. I adore them.
You know, but why have such a strong reaction to somebody that's only 5 years old and is not deliberately trying to do anything to you? It sounds like her own issue, of course, but it's always interesting with teachers. And you know, I've seen over the years, I'm doing a teacher training course for astrologers at the end of this year. Actually, finally, I've been threatening to do one for a long time, and because apart from anything else, just the experiences I've watched some teachers in astrology, and it's just, some of them are just horrendous. You think, why are you teaching? What you're doing really, what you really want to be is a lecturer. You want to be somebody that impresses with your knowledge, rather than to be helping people put the pieces together. And that to me is what a teacher's about. And I've got students who will be a bit hesitant, and they'll say, oh, do you mind if I ask a question? It's like, what are you doing here? If, you know, what am I doing here if I don't want to happily help you connect the dots? And I should retire from teaching the moment that I don't want to do that for anybody anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So it always astonished me. But anyway, let's come back to you. So what you do in a chart like this, and you can do this on your handheld device, your iPhone, whatever. This is Astro Gold, which is like a Mac and an iPhone version of Solar Fire. But you can get anything, and there are lots of free ones. This one, you know, you get what you pay for, and you might as well invest, if you're really interested in astrology, invest in a little program on your phone or on your computer. So we're going to do a bi-wheel. So we've got Stephanie's chart in the center, plus all her natal house, her birth chart house cusps. And then we're going to do a bi-wheel. So we're going to select subsidiary chart and select solar arc directions, and I'm going to select it for the day of your birth, so we can watch things grow. It doesn't matter what time of the day or where it is, but just put the day in. There we go. So the inner wheel and the outer wheel are exactly the same, and then I'm going to move the chart forward. You would have remembered this with Solar Fire at the LSA, Stephanie. I used to love putting it and showing people visually. So we're going to move everything forward a year on the outside wheel. So we're going to move it forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, for example. So Stephanie's 5th birthday, everything in the chart has moved forward. So the ascendant here has gone from 17 to 22. Descendant 17 to 22. Uranus has gone from 7 to 12. Jupiter from 2 to 7. And we can see pretty much at 5 years old, Jupiter has aligned with Uranus. And you can just move the chart forward, watch any particular point, the sun. And what we're looking for mainly are the moments that the planets on the outside wheel contact the inner wheel. So we could see, for example, that around the age of 15 or 16, the sun is about 15 degrees away from Mercury. And around the age of 15, let's just take it back a year. So is that 15? No, that's 15. Okay. Roughly, the sun is conjunct Mercury around the age of 14 or 15. It's 14 and a half.
I got very interested in astrology at that age.
Not surprising.
I remember my diary that I had that year, and I had all of the planetary symbols drawn in.
Wow.
You know, all the glyphs and everything. And you know, I guess, you know, Mercury being me, really, when you look at the chart as Gemini rising, it really illuminated my interests, I suppose, didn't it? I think that was not just a year of interest in astrology. I also kind of got interested in kind of witchcraft and, you know, superficial level, I'd say. I wouldn't say I was really like exploring it on a very deep level, but it was just, you know, a time for me to sort of understand that aspect of who I am, I think.
Well, also at the same time, because you can have multiple solar arc directions, or solar arcs as we call them, or directions at the same time. So as the sun is crossing past Mercury, the moon is heading towards Jupiter, not for another year, but maybe the witchcraft is a little bit associated with this the following year, when Pluto finally aligns with the moon and the moon aligns with Jupiter. So maybe that was your interest in casting spells and getting rid of rivals at school.
I think the film The Craft was out around, it'd probably been out for a few years, but I'd watched it and really loved it. And you know, a few films like that. So kind of that piqued my interest. I think I was working in a music shop, and I had friends around those times, and it was a real time of really getting involved with my social group and that kind of thing as well. So yeah, it was a time of really getting into who I am and understanding my social side, I suppose, really.
Right. And if we continue moving through the years, this is you now at 22. Gosh, and then and you don't have to do a year. You could do it by the month if you want to be exact. And let's take you all the way up to your most recent birthday. Okay, so in those 38 years, pretty much everything's moved about 38, 39 degrees. It's roughly a degree a year. Changes a bit in the summer. It's a little bit slower, a little bit faster in the winter. So different ways of looking at it. So we then would imagine, you know, looking at what's happening. So I always start off with the first house and look to see what planets might be at 1 degree, to see if Cancer is Chiron in Cancer is aspecting anything. We then might look at the ascendant, the next planet along, see if anything else is at 25, 26, etc. So lots of interesting ways of forecasting with the chart. The solar arc to me is one of the most interesting and effective, and it seems to come up time and time again.
Because we've been looking at what's happened in my past, but actually you can go ahead and look at things that are coming up in the future. Pick out a date that would, around that time, you know, those kind of events would transpire. And you can think about, you know, if it's in the nearish future, you can kind of come up with ideas for what's going on in that person's life at that time and how it might unfold. Or, you know, if it's in the distant future, you could say, oh, you're going to have an opportunity to, you know, really go deep on, you know, certain Uranian aspect of your own chart, you know, if you're looking at like the Pluto Uranus thing there, you know, that sort of thing. So it's a really interesting, I remember when you introduced this subject at the LSA and you said this is going to really be a really powerful prediction tool for you. It's going to really give you dates to work with and things like that. So and I have to say, it really, really does. It's incredibly effective. I've been using it throughout the time I've worked with my clients, and you know, and exploring it is just so much fun. It's so fascinating.
It is, and it continues. So, you know, your Jupiter Uranus are still 4.5, 5 degrees away. They're just 38 degrees later. So that everything stays in the same relationship on the outside wheel, but they just move through the sign. So yeah, we look at the aspects to the natal, but also look at when planets move to the end of a sign, that year that they're at 29 degrees and the year that they're at 0 degrees. They tend to be pivotal years of experience as well. So lots of things you can understand with that. But it's it's an interesting, I think it's a fascinating tool. And the thing, as always, if you see something coming up, rather than being fearful of it, saying, well, okay, if it's a Mars aspect, what can I do? I can get back to the gym. Or if you're like me, you don't know what the gym is, but you know, you hear other people have been, and
he
you
sounds
can.
great, this gym guy. I've not met him
This
yet.
gym, I know. I've always spelled it with a J. Yeah, get back to the gym, and think about Mars things that you want to accomplish during that time, rather than feeling like, oh, it's going to be an argument or a breakup or a split. It's interesting how our fears of transits and solar arcs and whatever we use tend to mold or at least tend to halt the opportunities that are arising. Because if you do have a problem in your relationship, or a problem with your mother, or a problem with with somebody in your life, or your boss or your work, anything like that, the chart will reflect that, but it doesn't mean something will definitely happen. So if you've got Mars moving into your 10th and you've got a real bastard of a boss, it may be a time that you want to assert yourself. It may be a time to really start pushing back a little bit, or considering doing your own thing, changing your job, being proactive. That would be Mars. But if something's building up and you're hiding from it or wanting it in any way, that Mars could also be a healthy release of assertiveness as well. It doesn't always have to be the worst case scenario. So
I think that's what Mars was for me when it shifted into Aries.
Yes.
I just got to the point where I just got fed up of, just being too polite all the time and sort of like being really accommodating for other people. I just kind of got to the point where I thought, I just can't be bothered anymore. Look, you're getting on my nerves. I just haven't got time for this, that kind of thing. Oh, you don't have to be rude with Mars. You just have to, be assertive. And I did. I think I sort of reconnected with many other things as well. It kind of, it's almost like a Mars got switched on in Aries in my head in a kind of, I don't know, it's like somebody plonked it down and it suddenly fired up this whole area of experience that I am still discovering. But yeah, I think at the point it was at 29 Pisces. You talk about the power degrees, like the 29 and the first or the 0 degrees being really important. And I definitely think at that point in my life, I was definitely going through some powerlessness, some difficult issues that I felt I really didn't have any control over. And as soon as it shifted into Aries, I thought, well, the stuff that I can control, I'm going to control it. I'm going to do what I can to make my situation better. So that was a very positive shift for me. And I was really welcoming that, really welcoming it.
Yeah, but it's also, we can see, this is pretty much from mid 2018 to mid 2019, it was at the final degree of Pisces. And then from mid 2019, it started to move into Aries, where it's going to be for 30 years. But that first degree, that first year is very powerful.
Yeah.
But we can wait for that. And I remember you and I chatting about it and saying, it's going to move into Aries soon and etc. But it's also that final degree of Pisces is a time to put things of a Piscean nature to rest. So it could be that if there's anybody that's a bit of a psychic vampire, I like to call them, people that are a little bit, perennial victims, poor me, rescue me, look after me. Particularly, with Mars, it can be about men in your life, male friends, that sort of thing. Almost being able to have a good boundary as Mars leaves Pisces is almost like, I'm going to say goodbye to some of those people in my life whose energy is very much the victim or the martyr. Yeah. And once you've got rid of them, you can move into Aries and you sort of turn up the temperature, turn up the speed, turn up the heat, quite a different energy. So there's always something to do. It's not like you have to wait for the Mars to move into Aries. There were things for you to do that year too, which I'm sure you did as well.
Yeah. It it was a great time actually. And you know, I all the difficult stuff while it was working through that, those later degrees of Pisces, was all incredibly useful, you know. And part of establishing boundaries for me was about studying counseling skills and you know, really exploring, really trying to understand that kind of energy vampire type of thing. And you know, the fact that everybody's got their own issues, and you know, sometimes I can be looking I'm going to obviously be concerned about the impact it has on me and how it makes me feel, but helping me to understand, you know, other people in another respect as well. I suppose the Gemini Ascend way to do it is to study a course on, you know, other people and what motivates them, and you know, their difficulties. But yeah, as soon as it kind of shifted into Aries, I definitely almost within weeks had to close the door on a couple of friendships, and just sort of really, I did establish a firm boundary. I think I feel like I've done a lot of boundary setting over the past few years, like it's just part of what I've been doing. So but I think that, you know, it is about being more not being afraid to protect yourself really from, you know, things that are exhausting. And if you're too generous and too kind and too considerate and don't want to upset other people, you end up just exhausting yourself really at the end of it.
You end up pleasing no one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I mean,
it's true.
we don't just look at conjunctions. If we were to go back to 2017, we could see that Mars was at the end of Pisces, but it's squaring at 90 degrees to that Neptune in the seventh. So really, that's the beginning of the boundaries from 2016, 2017 onwards.
And Chiron in my first house as well was feeding into that too.
Oh, that's right, because you've got an exact Mars Chiron, so it's like a double whammy linking up to the Neptune.
Yeah, that was a big time in my life, huge, massive. And yeah, it was so funny because I was having a Pluto transit at the time, and it got to the point where I got so obsessed with that solar arc direction, I totally forgot I was having a Pluto transit. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. I'd been waiting all my life since I joined the school, and somebody went, "Oh, look at Pluto creeping up on your sun." I think it was Richard Swatton that first kind of drew my attention to it. And I was like, "Oh, what does it mean?" And so I was obsessing over Pluto for all these years. And then when it got to just approaching that that T-square, that solar arc directed T-square that you just put up on the screen, at that point, I was so immersed in that world, I'd completely forgotten my Pluto transit. And my Pluto transit happened, and I suddenly was like, oh yeah. Like it's all part of that big story. But you know, for me, I was focusing on specific segments of it without realizing it's a bigger picture kind of thing.
Yeah, and also just being unaware of certain things is a story in itself.
Yeah.
You know, if you were to sit with me or sat with me back then, and we were looking at Mars and everything else, and you hadn't spoken about your Pluto, or you hadn't realized it was there, that would tell me what you're not focusing on. It would give me an insight into maybe what you're missing, what you need to focus on. So it's always interesting to see what people focus on and what they're ignoring by accident, deliberately, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And also clients give you, some of your listeners will know this as well, who are doing readings for people, consultations for people. They'll know that clients lead them to exactly the transit or the direction that they need. So if you're having a Neptune transit or solar art direction, and clients are talking about being tired, being overwhelmed, being exhausted, feeling overly emotional, feeling lost, disorientated, they're using words that as astrologers, we immediately know it's Neptune. And the great thing about that, they tell us what to look at without even realizing it. So that's another great thing, that you learn to listen to what the client is telling you, and then you know exactly where to look in the chart. So that's another great great feature of it, really.
Yeah, so well, thank you for explaining that, and I loved going through that again with you. I loved it. And like you said, you've got a book that you've written. You've got a leaflet which developed into a book that might even develop into an even bigger book one day. Who knows?
It won't. No, it won't. It was great to do, because in the Solar Arc Handbook, the big book, which is, in fact, I've got a copy here. Let me have a look. Just happen to have one on the shelf. There we go. So look like that. And it's about 290 pages, yeah? But in there are lots of essays I've written about different examples. There's one about Jane Fonda, the Queen, power degrees, and then loads and loads of other examples. But yeah, I wanted to also describe my approach to forecasting and how to do it, or how I feel it can be done in there. So I wanted to really do a forecasting book on solar arc. So it was fun, but it would never be 600 pages. Thank you, Noel. I don't think I'm ready for that, but it was fun to expand it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Noel's already done it, so why you don't need to do another compendium, do you? So, and you've got so many other areas of interest that you write about all the time anyway. So it's nice to be able to have that freedom to really explore various areas of astrology that you want to do. So I can't wait for the freedom to do that too. I'm getting there. It's approaching, and I'm still doing what I'm lucky to do what I love with the podcast, actually. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I'm getting loads of great feedback all the time. So I really appreciate you taking the time to not only come and just have a general chit chat, but also to explore a really interesting subject like solar arc.
Oh, well, every bit of astrology is interesting.
Oh, I know.
If you're interested in it, it becomes interesting. And this is why I love, I always say, if I teach something better than anybody else, in all modesty, I will teach it. But if I find somebody that does it as well as I do or better, I want them to come and teach it for the students, because you get a real sense of that passion, that experience, those observations. And that's, life is about remembering and learning from our good teachers. So when you find a subject you love to do, teach it. You'll learn twice as much by actually teaching it as well. So,
well, if anybody listening to this podcast wants to come and learn from you, where can they come and do that?
Well, the easiest way, thank you, is to go to www.londonschoolofastrology.com, and that has all the online stuff. And we're now in 2021 as we speak. By the end of 2021, the courses are going to be online. Some of them are going to still be in London, but we're going to be doing a mix of pre-recorded and live classes to explore what you watched in the pre-recorded. So I got a little bit tired of just repeating everything. So doing all the pre-recorded stuff and then every year doing the same subjects. And I've decided to merge the two so students can watch all the pre-recorded and then come into class online or in person and learn more about how to take that subject further with their charts, with their examples. So trying to make the most of the online experience, but also a lot of interactive work. So that's what we're doing. We're in process, just changing that slightly so it becomes more rounded for everybody, particularly because the world's gone online and everybody's become a Zoomer.
Yeah. And it's not just astrology, is it? You started doing a palmistry diploma course as well, didn't you? So
palmistry and tarot as well. Yes. We had graphology, handwriting for a while, and I have a load of books just behind my desk here in front of me on graphology. And one of these days when I head off and spend a Christmas in Mexico, or I often go to China or Japan to teach, I'm going to take all my graphology books and just have like a beach holiday somewhere and just learn handwriting analysis, because it's one of the subjects I really want to learn. And then I'll end up teaching it, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, well, I look forward to learning that from you as well next. So, okay, well, I guess that's it. Was there any other routes that you wanted people to find you? Have you got any other contact areas?
I'm Astrologer Frank on Instagram, but I don't post often. And people can come and see me. I'm almost at the point of 5,000 friends on Facebook.
Wow,
and most of them I don't. But I mean, most of them I don't know. But come and see me on there, and we can have a laugh. You can always trying to write something funny on there, or trying to move away from all the politics and the anger and the hate. And I only tend to say nice things on Facebook if I can, or if I can't think of anything nice to say, I don't say it,
I've reached that point as well. I think it's the wisest way to behave in the public arena.
It is. So even if people beg to sweep you up into it and want you to be involved, life's too short to be unpleasant with people.
I'd rather channel my energy into doing something interesting and fun rather than negative and kind of just weighs you down a bit, doesn't it? All that negativity. So
yeah. Go for a run, go for a jog, go and see Jim.
I was just going to say that. I really must give him a call.
Give him a call. Don't go see him. Just give him a call. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Frank. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thank you. And hi, everybody, whoever you are out there. It's been fun to connect.
I can guarantee they've loved it. Thanks a lot. Take care.